feet above the floor, perched in a niche carved into the wall to the right of the altar. Walker fell to his knees and made the sign of the cross. No doubt about it. Saint Joseph was crying. Chapter 1. Eddie was able to interview Tisdale before the cops showed up, and he was confident he had the goods to ace a column they'd at least bill on the front page. Some 20 minutes earlier, he'd had nothing for the next day's column. Oh, he had a story he could fall back on, but it was for shit. He needed to head for his office and work the phone. He dressed quickly in jeans, a striped shirt, and a brown tweed jacket, and carried his dark blue overcoat as he closed the door behind him and walked down the hall. Turning a corner to get to the 12th floor elevator, he noticed a strapping middle-aged man slumped against a wall, his face in his hands. As Eddie approached him, he realized the man was crying. "Excuse me, but are you okay?" The man looked at Eddie with red-rimmed eyes and said nothing. "I know I've seen you around," Eddie said, then gestured toward the door next to the man's left shoulder. "This your apartment?" "Yes." "You okay?" Eddie said, extending a hand. "I'm Eddie Sabella." "I know who you are. You're the writer." "Yeah," Eddie said, pausing, and then, "Funny, isn't it? We live on the same floor and we've never spoken. It's so New York. What's your name?" "Jack Tisdale," he said, and tears came streaming down his face again. "What's wrong? Anything I can do?" Tisdale shook his head. "It's my wife. She's dead." "I'm so sorry," Eddie said. "When did she die?" "A few minutes ago," he said. "I killed her." "You what?" "She's in there," Tisdale said. "In my apartment." Eddie's first instinct was to reach for the doorknob and see for himself. "You can't go in there," Tisdale said, grabbing Eddie's hand. "Okay, but we have to call the police." "I called the lobby, and the doorman said he'd do it." Tisdale took a long, shuddering breath. "Mind staying with me till they come?" "Sure." An awkward silence started to gather between them, and then Eddie said, "You want to talk about it?" When the cops arrived on the scene, they found Eddie interviewing Tisdale and taking notes. He tried to follow the officers into Tisdale's apartment, but they stopped them from entering, citing standard operating procedure. Eddie was pissed. They recognized his name and his picture from the paper, and they claimed to be regular readers of his column. They even agreed he'd covered more murders than most cops would see in an entire career, and they had to admit he was probably savvy enough not to compromise a crime scene. Still, rules were rules. Everything was locked down until the homicide detectives arrived. "You know the drill, Sabella," one of the cops said in an exasperated voice. "Why are you busting our balls?" "Because it's my job." Before Eddie left, he managed to badger the cops into describing the crime scene. The wife was seated at the dining room table, face down in a plate of cottage cheese and syrupy canned peaches, brains oozing out the back of her head. There was a bloody golf club on the floor. "An 8-iron, am I right?" Eddie said, raking his fingers through some strands of dark hair that had fallen over his forehead. "Looked like it. He told you, huh?" "He did," Eddie said, shutting his notepad. "Thanks, officer." Eddie decided to hustle to the paper and start writing rather than wait for the homicide detectives to arrive and check out Tisdale's apartment. He'd call the precinct later to see if they had anything substantive to add to what he'd already pumped from Tisdale. He doubted they would. On the way out of his apartment building, Eddie threw a few questions at Jorge the doorman to fill in some holes in his reporting. Jorge provided him with more than enough to flesh out his column. Tisdale was a lab technician who worked nights at Lenox Hill Hospital. According to Jorge, Mrs.